Hello everyone, I am a bit late, apologies. Thank you for being patient. I'm sure you've all been sat around waiting for me with nothing else to do, because that's what happens in my world. Everyone else just sits around, waits for me to be ready for things. And Joanne was doing that for 10 minutes, so thanks for being patient. For those, I've got animals everywhere, sorry. For those who don't know me, my name is Heidi Mavir. I'm the founder of EOTAS Matters. We work supporting parents and carers in neurodivergent homes, securing educational provision for their children and young people. I also do a lot of work in the disability advocacy space, the mental health space. I'm a big advocate for lived experience and parent professionals being really well placed to support families. So as part of our Changemakers program, I'm interviewing people who are working in the field of SEN, disability, mental health, parental wellbeing, to talk to them about the work that they're doing and to connect them with my communities. So today we're joined by the incredible Dr. Joanne Riordan. I always feel like doctor was so posh. Look at me, I know doctors. Who is an educational psychologist. And we're going to talk a little bit about Joanne's work and tell you a little bit about how you can benefit from some of her expertise. Hello.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Heidi. Unfortunately, I'm not very posh, just to disappoint everyone there.
Are you a doctor? That makes you posh in my book.
Fair enough.
So it'd be really good to just start with a little bit about you and what got you here, basically.
Yeah.
Like, your background would be amazing.
Yeah, so if I start with where I am, and then I'll maybe go backwards into how I got here, if that's useful, Heidi.
Amazing.
Fabulous. Yes. Good. Okay, so I'm obviously like Dr. Joanne Riordan. I'm a neurodivergent educational psychologist. I'm the director of Dr. Joanne Limited, and my business is a neurodiversity specialist business. So everything I do is from within the neurodiversity paradigm. So, for example, I specialise in supporting neurodivergent young people and their families. Do that in loads of different ways. So, like doing psychological assessments, being one of my main bits of work, helping to identify a child's strengths, which are super important, as well as their needs, and then what are the next steps we need to take to ensure they're making progress. Using my lived experience as a neurodivergent individual and mum of a neurodivergent child, as well as my professional expertise in that. And everything I do, as I said, is neurodiversity affirming within that assessment. So I'm very much working in consultation with the parents and child as the experts in that child. If the school is involved, they're the experts on the child's education, and me as the expert on the psychology. When I see that child, I make sure that assessment is really neurodiversity affirming, so that child leaves the room feeling better about themselves than when they entered, which is not always easy when you're assessing lots of child's difficulties, but I make sure I sort of tailor that to the child's strengths and difficulties. So a lot of my work as well is around PDA young people and ensuring that my assessments are adapted to be like low demand, or perhaps with like non-speaking communities, and thinking about how I can gain the views of those who perhaps are less able to convey that verbally. I work with lots and lots of highly anxious children. I wasn't a highly anxious child, so I think that really lends into that nicely. When I'm talking about next steps, my next steps are really neurodiversity affirming, so lots around building self-advocacy, how we can help that child be their authentic selves, and how we can support that young person through co-regulation. Other things I do is I deliver CPD to schools on being neurodiversity affirming. So I have, for example, a whole academic year programme that 60 schools have gone through, and that also gets brought in by local authorities to become more neurodiversity affirming in the way that school is run in all different systems, right down to how you interact with a single child versus the policies of the school. I also do support for families in supporting them to understand their neurodivergent child. So I have the Differently Parenting programme, which is like super well reviewed. Currently, it's only 2 hours long, and it gets brought in by families, local authorities, and parenting groups. But I'm currently making it a 6 session programme because everyone is really positive, but says they want more of it. So kind of doing that as well. And I do CPD for psychologists as well. I also quality assure psychological advice of other educational psychologists. I'm a senior educational psychologist, and I do that role because it means I can ensure that psychological advice going towards education, health and care plans is neurodiversity affirming. So, adjusting things like, rather than, I don't know, building tolerance to certain sensory input like loud noises, changing that to helping the child to advocate for their needs, helping them to understand their own sensory preferences, thinking about how we can change the environment, and making sure that, through that bit of work, one by one, helping to make EHCPs more neurodiversity affirming. Then I also do some work with as a guest lecturer at a couple of universities, making sure that right from the point psychologists and other professionals are training, that they understand about the neurodiversity paradigm, and making sure it's kind of part of how they work, and so on. So lots of things, I could go into more, but there's a kind of like snapshot of what I do now. And I guess sort of why I do that, we sort of roll backwards. As I said, I'm neurodivergent myself, so diagnosed ADHD and dyspraxic, and have sensory processing differences. So I'm able to utilise loads of my lived experience in my work. So, for example, I had emotional-based school avoidance myself as a young person, then interestingly became a teacher in later life, because of one teacher who had that really authentic relationship with me. I have also experienced things such as neurodivergent burnout myself. So when I see that in young people I'm working with, I'm able to use that doctor title you mentioned to really advocate for their needs. And, that advantage is that people like, the schools, local authorities kind of listen to what I've got to say, and I'm able to educate others around that, support the young person to understand what's going on for them, and then think about next steps we can do. I also have a neurodivergent child, which I briefly mentioned about before. So within our family, we've got loads of diagnoses. As I said, I'm dyspraxic and ADHD, but also PDA, dysgraphia, dyslexia, trying to think what else, hypermobility, and so on. So we've had a lot of experience of these kind of things, so I see the systems from all different angles and really get it. I've sat writing psychological advice for education, health and care plans. I, as a senior educational psychologist, quality assure other psychologist advice. So I've sat on panels like specialist schools, but I also have a child with an education, health and care plan myself. So I really get, to be honest, how hard that was to achieve, even though, everyone agreed my child needed an education, health and care plan, just like timescales, people not sticking to them, having to chase everyone up. I understand the trauma that kind of comes from those sorts of experiences as well.
Even as a professional, even as a qualified ed psych, you experience that. Yes, I think it's really important to reassure parents that when you're having that experience, that is a universal experience. It is not you. Even those of us who should be listened to and should be taken seriously and should be able to get things done, we find the system really difficult, right?
Yeah, even though I literally had worked in the same teams, I was trying to get to support my young person. And even though those teams acknowledged my child needs that support, it was still so stressful. Being on the other side was such a different experience. And it was very an isolating experience because, a lot of my friendship group, for example, we would support each other through other aspects of having children, the newborn stage and so on. But actually for me, going through my child having a neurodivergent burnout, and then the education, health and care plan, that statutory assessment process, was really quite unique, and I found it quite isolating. So I sort of said, right, once I'm through this, I'm going to utilise my knowledge of the systems and that lived experience to really, support other families in these kind of situations. And to be honest, I love my job. It's the best job ever. But currently there isn't that many, neurodiversity affirming educational psychologists. I do lots of CPD, and it's growing, but that takes time. And also not everyone, you can't buy that lived experience, and that real deep understanding. So I can't help all the families that contact me currently, even if I worked every hour of the day. So I'm really trying to think about how I can help more. And that Differently parenting program, which is all about how we can support young people in neurodivergent families, being a really useful tool to do that. But I want to expand that further kind of going forward, and thinking about doing more kind of a community online that I can support going forward. Yeah,
so important. I think that, certainly working in the community I work in, and, through our programs and the Marble Run and, our group programs, what I see more than anything is that parents need community. more than information, more than advice, more even than good advocacy services. Parents need to be with other parents and with professionals who understand what they're going through. Because that's the difference between making it through in one piece and not, basically. Because like you said, it is so isolating and frightening and worrying and stressful and anxiety inducing. And, you know, even if you're not pursuing any HCP, by its very nature, having a neurodivergent household is all of those things. So, and so when I first started hearing about the work that you were doing and knew that you were kind of working on some group programs, and I thought, thank God, because like you say, there aren't many neurodivergent affirming, not intentional neurodivergent affirming ed psychs, and you know, you're a pretty rare breed, and we need more of you. And we need more of that expertise, because I think, well, you might be able to speak to this. I think culturally, in the way that we bring ed psychs through and qualify them and get them experienced, there are so many steps in that process that makes it hard for them to be, first of all, aware of neurodivergence, but secondly, actually to embed that in their practice, right? Because of the systems that they're working within. Have you seen that?
I think the way historically it's been taught is very much expert led, but those experts not being people who are autistic themselves, but perhaps being like researchers in the field of autism, but not autistic, or, you know, the same with like ADHD or whatever type of neurodivergence we're talking about. And interestingly, I went in really recently and did training on neurodiversity, specifically around autism, at University College London, UCL, their doctorate students for educational psychology. And they always said like how useful it was actually to have a lecture that was like me talking about my lived experience, but also really being mindful that, you know, I'm not autistic, so really lending into that lived experience of autistic individuals and advocates. And you know, they said that was like one of the most, some people said that was the most useful lecture they've had on their course. And I think, you know, I hadn't touched any research to plan that lecture, and I think really there's such a power in expertise and lived experience, and we really need to catch up in the professional world and understand that, you know, we need to be lending into that as heavily, or if not more, than professional expertise that's seen through research or, you know, doing a job for a long time.
And we need professionals like you, basically letting parents know what that looks like and helping parents to work out how to advocate in that space, and kind of going in with their eyes open and knowing a little bit about how that system works. You know, like I don't believe anyone is intentionally not being neurodivergent affirming. And we know the system isn't. So it's about skilling those parents and those carers, right? So they know what they're going into, and they know who to speak to and what to say and how to do that. And
absolutely
embed that in their own homes. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and also I was thinking another area that, you know, I support a lot of families through is often you think, right, okay, so I'm a bit concerned. Yeah, I'm concerned about my child in this particular area. But then you suddenly realise not only do I want someone that's neurodiversity affirming, I could technically see an occupational therapist or a speech and language therapist or an educational psychologist. So like, even if you're in a sort of privileged position where you want to sort of buy in some support for your young person, it can be quite overwhelming thinking that, you know, who should I see and so on. So I do a lot of support with families around, you know, what's the particular concern, what are the strengths, and then helping them to understand the systems that perhaps this is the person you should go to, or before you apply for an education, health and care plan, these are the bits of evidence you need or you need to think about, and so on. And what can you write in your application that is existing but helps it get through, that you may not think to write about, and therefore because you missed it, it hasn't kind of gone through the panel and been accepted.
Exactly. Someone's just saying that they did a lot of hard work with the first draft last week. Not very much professional support. I can't even speak. So I'm just signposting to my website, which has some signposting for how to start thinking about drafts and all that stuff. So please do go and find over that. I think that's our first ever comment on YouTube. How exciting! So talk to me about what you've got in the pipeline, what you're working on, because there's some good stuff coming, right? Sorry.
Yeah, that's some good stuff. So as I said, that Differently Parenting program is going to be extended to 6 sessions. Until now, it's been brought in, say, by like local authority send teams for their parents, which is fantastic. But now I want to open it up wider so parents can kind of fund that themselves and buy that in, support their family in a really quick way. So that's going to become 6 sessions. I am currently writing a book. So that's with a particular publishing house. which is around PDA affirming. It's a guide to PDA for professionals. So it's all around how to be PDA affirming in like assessments with PDA young people, how to write PDA affirming like recommendations involving the family and so on. And it's also, I've set myself a bit of a challenge on this because it's also for professionals where perhaps you haven't had time to establish a relationship. So we know that trust is that key thing with PDA, but say you're, for example, an occupational therapist, you've been given like one off session to assess this young person, what should you do and how should you go about that? And that's something I'm very successful in. Also, talking with Eliza Fricker may be involved in that, so that's quite interesting and positive as well. So that's exciting. And then going forward, what I'd really like to do is set up an online community with families, so focusing on families with neurodivergent young people, and to make people feel less isolated. So A, that community, but B, the kind of support for them and information that is both evidence-based and informed by lived experience. So, for example, how to support their young person through exams and GCSEs, what to do during autistic burnout. And very much my view is that parents are the experts. So it's more giving families the information they need to then make decisions themselves based on their deep understanding of their family and what works for them. But unless we have that information, it's really hard to know what to do next. And I think for me as well, like I have that privilege that I am a doctor, I'm a psychologist, so I purposely chose PDA as my first book because as a parent of a PDA young person, I know that some people, that's one of the things that people question, does it really exist and so on. And so I want to say, look, that's like doctor name on the title, does exist, and this is what you can do about it. And I really want to use my voice to support our whole neurodivergent community going forward, really.
Oh my God. Do you know when your book will be out? Have you got a publishing date yet or not?
No, I know I need to have it back by November. I'm going, as an ADHD person who's really busy with other work, I haven't been the best at writing it yet. So the week after
Don't worry, I wrote my book in 2 weeks, you'll be fine.
Well, I'm going away in like 2.5 weeks on a week-long trip. I've never gone away. I've got 3 kids. I've never gone away on my own totally. But my plan is in that week is to really like focus, get loads of it done, so that when I come back, I've got that sort of skeleton and I can work on that. So that's my hope. But I'm quite demand avoidant myself in some ways, so it's quite interesting. So I'm not very. I don't want to like read other books that may inform my book in a way, because I don't want to seem like I'm copying. And I've had so much experience with PDAs, and I also want the book to be PDA affirming, so that a PDA person could read it and not feel like I'm placing demands on them. So I'm kind of coming at it at that really interesting challenge as well. So it's a challenge, but I'm excited about it.
Super demand avoidant and ADHD and writing a book is a whole new experience all of its own when it's neurotype.
Just give me tips then.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
Yeah,
but like, yeah, and just trying to use like all that lived experience. As I said, I was, had emotional based school avoidance. I was bullied. I was really high masker. Using that to understand the young people I work with. It's interesting because I didn't know that I was neurodivergent. So when I was a teacher, when I was first an educational psychologist, I was like, why am I so like successful and get on really well with our most challenging students or those that are autistic or ADHD, and it all makes much more sense now. I understand my neurodivergence and neurodivergence communication, but I was like, why is that? And and that's where my passion lies. Helping vulnerable groups is my thing, but the neurodiversity paradigm really changed my own life and helped me understand myself so much more, which is why I'm absolutely passionate about using it in my work and spreading it absolutely everywhere I can.
Amazing. And you've made a resource, which I'm excited about. You've made a free resource. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the resource is called The Calming Guide to Meltdowns. It's available in the resource section of my website. I think Heidi magically knows how to put a link to that. Oh, she's done it already. And really it's around, for me, when my child was younger, one of the most stressful things was meltdowns, and thinking about, how can I support them, that worry about making it worse, what do we do after school and so on. So it's very much a way of helping particularly parents and families, but also applies to anyone working with young people, to understand meltdowns, particularly in relation to neurodivergent young people, and then some suggestions of what they could do to help, but really helping to skill out what's happening, so that then you can make those decisions. So all around what's happening in the brain, that importance of co-regulation, and really, what's happening in the brain. So like, we literally know there are mirror neurons in our brain and our children's brains that respond to other people's emotions. That's really researched, and that's why it's important that we're really calm, so we can co-regulate. But in the same way, that relationship's bi-directional. So if your young person's really dysregulated, it's super easy to get dysregulated yourself, especially if, like me, you're neurodivergent, you add on like a noise sensitivity and your child's being noisy. So it's also, what can we do to make sure that we're calm first, so that they can borrow our calm and we can co-regulate. But I guess my unique take on it is understanding the science around that, as well as having lots of practice in my own house. So it's really like, someone who gets it, knows what it's like, explaining it in everyday terms, but with that scientific knowledge as well.
So important. Like the thing around co-regulation, and the thing that people who aren't living in neurodivergent homes don't understand is that, and it's one of the biggest challenges I think in neurodivergent homes, is that when you've got different neurotypes at play together, we are each other's triggers sometimes, and we're also each other's aggravators, and we're each other's co-regulation partners. So really vital. Thank you so much for making that. That's amazing. So people can come and find you on your website. They like, if you don't do anything else, go and get that free resource. I imagine, I haven't seen it yet, I'm going to go have a look myself, but I imagine it's something very handy to wave under noses, and we all need a lot of that, right? So go and get that from Joanne's website. I think there's also some of the resources on your website. People can find out how to contact you, how to get in touch with you. The next thing we expect to see from you is the extended course, right?
Exactly. So I've also got my Facebook page where I mention lots of these things as well. But yeah, the kind of extended course is going to come out in the autumn term, the 6-week differently parenting program. So that's also open to families who've done the 2-hour course. Is much more detail. And then going forward would be like this online community. And just like you said, really the power is that sense of belonging and someone who gets it, but also using my sort of role to write resources that you can put, in front of people to kind of help advocate for your young person, as well as understanding them. So, I just know that when my young person was in autistic burnout, it's back in 2021, it was before it was more widely accepted that it also occurs in young children. Having a resource, as well as me saying it as a professional, just help my child's school understand and accept it so much easier, and then put in place next steps that really made a big difference.
Amazing. And because it's from a proper doctor, it's got some credibility. So thank you for making that.
It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way, of course.
But we know what it is, right? So
but it does happen like that sometimes.
Families have that to say, look, a proper doctor wrote this. I'm not making this up. So
exactly.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm sure that people will come and find their way to you. We will make sure that we keep people informed on what you're doing, what you've got going on. If you are unsure where to find Joanne, just search Joanne Riordan, Dr. Joanne Riordan, or just go to drjoanne with an e.co.uk to go find her website, go to the resources section, download that freebie. And thank you so much for being with us. I'm so excited to see what happens next.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that.
I'm excited for the book. Stay with me. I'll say goodbye to you in the green room. But for now, thank you everyone for joining us on the live. Let us know if you watched on replay, if you've made it to the end. Drop a replay in the comments. We will see you all soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Bye.